I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brandon Amoroso, founder and president of Retention as a Service agency, Electric. And today, I'm actually joined by David Conforti, who's the co-founder and CEO of the Varfaj Group, which hopefully I didn't, butcher that pronunciation there, who is another Shopify Plus agency that's based out of Miami as well. So really excited to have you on today.
Yeah, likewise, Brendan. A little bit about us is, so I started Varfaj about 5 years ago now, when I was actually at NYU, and it started really not with, too much of a grand vision in mind, but just my friends and I had a lot of extra time in our hands while we were at NYU. We were in the business school there, and after one of my friends did his summer internship at Accenture, he realized what the space looked like for the agency and the consulting world, and we thought that we could do this ourselves. So we started doing smaller projects like websites, landing pages, logos, and then have really refined our offering, scaled our team since then. So we're up to 16 people now full time, doing primarily all Shopify work. And like you said, became a Shopify Plus agency last year. So doing some of the larger builds on the platform now, which has been really exciting.
Nice. You are the only other Shopify Plus agency owner I know who has a similar founding story to me, and that you started it in college, and you started it in college because you saw the way that it was being done and figured, if they can do this, then I can probably do this shit too. Which I took a class at USC that was around SEO marketing. And, after listening to the teacher for a couple weeks, I was like, there's no reason that I can't just start doing this. And just went for it.
Yeah, exactly. I think the cool thing about the e-com space too is that the bigger the company, the less they probably know about the nuances and the innovations in e-com. Which has been so surprised as we start to move up the value chain and work with bigger and bigger clients, how much more opportunity there is with these large companies that have legacy systems. Whereas I think, there's a lot of people that are more our age, maybe started their own brand, et cetera, they really know a lot about the space. So it's definitely that kind of that gap between the two, I'd say.
Yeah, I feel like there's two camps, well, really three. There's like the small businesses who really have no idea, where to go or how to get started. There's the small businesses who are started by, people who are digitally native and have everything in a row when it comes to their tech stack. And then there's the very large enterprise organizations who have, just a Frankenstein technology stack that is rife with inefficiencies, and then also a corporate structure that doesn't lend itself well to enabling or affecting change. So that's typically what we're running into.
Yeah, that you start to play the politics game when you work with some of the larger brands, right? I don't know. Have you run into that with Electric?
Yeah, we recently went through like a level of effort return on investment exercise, and going through it, part of the level of effort wasn't actually, how much time it would take to implement or how many dev hours or however, whatever. It was more so who are the various stakeholders and how many of them are there within the internal organization that we're going to have to, go to bat with or, pitch our case to before we can get sign off and approval on this initiative. And some of them were 6 different people would have to sign off, and, maybe this was potentially being looked at as encroaching on something else they had going on. And I'm like, literally this tech partner, we'll set it up for you for free, A/B test it against your entire website for 3 months. And you're saying, we can't address this until next Q4. I'm just like that boggles my mind. But I guess there's a reason in some instances why it's done that way, but I think it's been taken, sort of too far. Where I get
Yeah,
having checks and balances and stuff like that, but not when it is just
totally.
so unbelievably ridiculous that you end up not being able to do anything.
Totally. One of our larger clients, we're doing this migration for them right now. Actually, we're migrating 8 of their markets, so the US and then 7 international stores from BigCommerce to Shopify. And it's they are owned by a very large parent company. And that's been pretty interesting to see how decisions are made and how the team functions, because it's something, that being like an entrepreneur ourselves, like we've never really dealt with. Like I've never had really a job at a real company, so to speak. Like it's started basically working for myself at the age of 18. So seeing how that goes has been an interesting insight, and I think that they just have so many compliance games to play, which I definitely am not jealous of. But it's you have to play that balance of like, yes, we're compliant, but are we innovating? Are we moving fast enough as well? So it's a trade-off, and I definitely see that. I think it's actually heartening as an entrepreneur because you see how much opportunity there is in all spaces. Because even though there might be a really big player there, you now have insight of they cannot move as fast as some of the more disruptive, more nimble startups.
Mm-hmm. And as it relates to dealing with those internal politics, and then also I guess secondary question would be, do you think it's a blessing or a curse that you haven't worked at a quote unquote real company before? But how do you navigate those internal politics artfully so that you're not pissing anybody off, but still keeping the business? And then do you think it's been a blessing or a curse that you haven't had a traditional, work background and experience?
Yeah, I think that as far as because there's kind of two things. There's like internally with our team how that plays, and then externally when we work with our clients how that plays. And I think that internally that has been a good and a bad thing. It's definitely presented a lot of learning curves where, for instance, we had employees coming to me saying like, hey, we need to be doing one-on-ones, we need to be implementing all of these things that larger companies have, performance reviews, etc. And I thought, oh wow, it's a really great idea. So internally, that's been some of the learning curves, like I said. But I think that the opportunities that those presents are way bigger than the downsides, because on the upside, you have people taking more ownership of the task, feeling like they're really part of the company, can impact change. We don't have necessarily these big mundane processes that have been in place forever, but really it's a thing that people can come into and make their own. And the part that has been really big for me is, like you said, I haven't worked at a company before, a real company. So I do a lot of reading and try to gather as much context from previous entrepreneurs as possible. Like two of my favorite books are No Rules, which is by the creator, the founder, Reed Hastings of Netflix. And then Ed Catmull wrote Creativity Inc., which is about Pixar. And those are two really, and they're an international organization, so there's a lot of really cool learnings there. And then Creativity Inc. was fascinating because they have this delicate art of giving feedback to the creative process, and what that looks like, how to give proper feedback, how to grow people creatively. So trying to fill that void, or maybe that lack of experience.
And I think it's a good thing to be able to, just hop in and, test without having preconceived notions and assumptions as
Mm-hmm.
well, which is something I think I would have been, a lot more jaded and had a lot more internal biases if I had gone and worked at, an agency ahead of starting my own. Though it would have helped a lot in terms of credibility and like network, but I don't know if it would have helped so much in like doing something differently or being able to think creatively or outside of the box. Though there were definitely things that we did that like were just objectively stupid. Because I was like, oh yeah, like I don't need to do that shit. That doesn't make any sense. But there actually is a reason that some of these agencies do some of the things the way they do them. And so there's a little bit of blind confidence there that these guys are idiots and they have no idea what they're doing, and so I'm going to do everything differently, which totally. I also would not recommend as well.
What were some of those? I have a few off the top of my head, but I'm curious to hear what you said.
So like I resisted the concept of a project manager, client success manager, account manager, whatever you want to call it, for the longest time, because I always just looked at that person for better or worse as an extra body that was taking payroll and time and money and not necessarily providing real tangible results or value for the business that they were working for. But over time realized that they're a necessary conduit to be able to effectively communicate and work with a client. And also if you train them properly and have it set up in the right way, they actually can be a value add from a strategic standpoint, versus just being somebody who's essentially there to, connect the dots, actually have them be more of a strategic thinker and almost like a Shopify consultant, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. But that was one that I resisted for like, 2+ years because I just didn't. And I, just like you, a bunch of Google, a bunch of like random books, and I went through a variety of different like organizational structures when it came to how are we going to structure the team. Or are we going to do like a pod structure? Are we going to do more of your standard traditional hierarchy, things like that? And so that was a constant, sort of ebb and flow of which route were we going to go or not go.
Yeah. How do you like the pod structure?
It just wasn't really scalable. Like for us, the way that we ended up doing it is looking at it more at an individual level. But we were, predominantly email and SMS. We had some SEO and content and some web design and development as well. But each individual ended up in a particular, vertical or verticals. So like we had one person who pretty much took all the skincare and beauty clients because that just sort of happened over time. And then we would track basically workload based off of clients. So some people might have, only 2 clients, but they only have 2 clients because those 2 clients, take up a significant amount of bandwidth, but then somebody else might have 7. And so really it came down to, how many touch points per month were they responsible for? And then the CSMs essentially act as, the conduit for, anywhere between 5 to, I think the most one ever had was like 12 clients. And then we fill in the pieces around that particular CSM. So it wasn't like this ideal world where, there was a pod with a CSM who worked with the same email and SMS team members every single time, because we'd have to have essentially like perfect client inflow and outflow where like we were never out of whack, but some clients would come in at like, a $3,000 a month retainer, and then we'd have somebody else at like a $15,000 a month retainer. And so that just made it impossible to keep that pod structure.
Definitely. That's something that we're evaluating right now. And I think that having seen, for instance, we've come in and like picked up pieces from projects that a larger agency worked on. And I think that they gave us a lot of confidence as well, realizing that, they also that I was resisting for a while was getting any junior talent. So we really focused on like, we hire a lot of ex-Shopify. We hire a lot of people that have been in the industry for decades. And that really allowed us to get give our clients a really high level of expertise when they're coming on. And I really thought that like margins and working capital, and I realized that those people are really expensive. And so trying to find the balance of senior talent with rock solid SOPs and processes then allows your junior talent to actually outperform itself, and like act as more senior talent.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been something that we're focusing on now.
We actually went the reverse route where we were so scrappy and we're just like throwing bodies at that shit. And a lot of training, and I actually had difficulties doing it the other way, or like bringing in somebody with experience. And then, I'd bring in somebody with experience and try to delegate, but then would realize, sort of very quickly that maybe they didn't have as much experience as, one would think, or they did have experience, but it just wasn't the right experience, or, just because you have experience doesn't mean you actually know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so that was like a balancing act.
Yeah. It's also this, like you said, it's a balancing act, I think, at where we're at, which is that you are not a small team of, 3 or 5 people, but you're not a huge team of 200 or 300 either. And there needs to be this balance between providing leadership and providing that seniority, but also actually getting in there and doing the work. And that takes a special person, I think, which is where like you got to cycle through a fair amount of people. And, if you make a mishire, I think the best thing you can do is be very decisive with the outcome there. So identifying that person is a mishire, and then rectifying the situation as quick as possible and moving on to the next. And then you're one step closer to figuring out what the ideal hire looks like.
Yeah. What does your hiring, process look like from, requisition of the job all the way through, prospecting for candidates and then getting them actually, onboarded to the team? Because that was something that was always changing and evolving for us, especially as we grew, and was never perfected and still isn't perfected by any means.
No.
So how do you try and manage that? Yeah. The silent plug in the background.
I think that I've never been a big fan of a formal hiring process. We generally tend to we have our org structure lined out, and we keep constant updates of where we want to be in 6 months and 12 months. So we know what the org structure we're building towards. And then what we do is I'm always prospecting new talent. So being, that a lot of our teams from Shopify, they have huge networks in the Shopify talent pool. So pulling other people from Shopify. And then now that we have, many people that have also come from other agencies, they're pulling past coworkers, et cetera. So really being targeted with our outreach and trying to grab people from existing networks, because I think that the experience I've had of like posting a job on Indeed, getting applicants, running an interview is just horrible.
Yeah, it's a painful process for sure. We put together these questionnaires that we would force everybody to fill out before they were even, potentially considered for a role. And that allowed us to, weed out a lot of those that are not serious very quickly. It's like, if you're not even willing to fill out, a short little questionnaire about the role, then, your LinkedIn easy apply is not, the person that I want to be talking to by any means. So
definitely.
And
we had one. Oh yeah, go for it.
I was gonna say the issue I found with agencies is like you'll sell something and then you might need to, fill or have capacity, at least when we were early on. And so then it sort of just became, who's just good enough versus who's the best. And then, fortunately, we're in more of a proactive hiring like playing field now, where we have enough resources and capital to be able to do so. But when you're just like bootstrapping from nothing, it really is just like, do you have a beating pulse, and are you willing to work and and dive in here?
Yeah, that's such a to this is actually the best person to do the job. One thing that's helped us is that when we hire someone, we generally hire them on a 3-month contract first, and before extending that full-time like W-2 offer. And that way, because we've had interviews that people have interviewed so well, their resume looks amazing, but then there is that intangible piece that you can't quite quantify, which is desire to work. And trying to gauge someone's desire to work is really tough in an interview. So there's no other better way to do that than to actually get them on the desk, get them doing the job, see how they take to everything in stride.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That's what we did originally, but not because of that, just more so, we only had part-time work for that person. And then as it, scaled and as we got in more business, then the opportunity would come for that. So we sort of like fell into that unintentionally. But like, what are some of the things that you've uncovered that are sort of pitfalls or things that you wish you would have known before starting an agency, or really just starting a business as a whole and scaling it up?
Number one, I think, is a focus on working capital, especially as a bootstrap business. Focus on getting, moving opportunities through your pipeline and converting that to cash as quickly as possible. I think that that's something that allows you to scale in an effective manner. And it's really tough to grow and to scale if you're not doing a good job of converting the work that you're doing into money at a very basic sense. Where like we fell into that pitfall early on was that carrot that clients may dangle down the road, or accepting, especially when we started working with some of our bigger clients, big holding companies would come to us and be like, yeah, we're going to pay you net 60, because they could kind of throw their weight around. Do you know what I mean? And then
the net 60 conversations, I always was just like, what you realize you're working with like a 20-person Shopify agency that's run by a bunch of 20-year-olds. Like, where the hell do you think we're going to accept net 60? It's wild.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, did you play that game? I have.
No,
I've played it. I was like, I want your logo. I want this work.
I don't think we ever got as far as net 60. I'm pretty sure we got somebody to sucker us into net 45. But like typically the absolute most would be net 30. But then you just get, creative with when you actually sending the invoice. So, net 60, if you're sending at the beginning of the month, is not really net 60. It's more like net 30 or net 45. And so the devil is always in the details there, because, we aligned with one client on net 30. And they're like, you're billing us at the beginning of the month. And I'm like, yeah, it's net 30. And they're like, no, you should be billing us at the end of the month. And so then I'm basically out, a full month of salary and payroll before, that's technically even due for them. Right. And then taking into account that, they're probably not going to, actually, I won't even say probably, nobody pays on time. So you're out at least another 15 days. And then I was like our AR guy forever. And I'm just like,
yeah.
Which I think was bad, definitely bad. One, because it's a waste of my time. But second is, they think they're all buddy with me. And like at the end of the day, no, it's like, pay me. And if there was sort of like the big bad CFO or something that we could have come in there and, provide that sort of wall between me and the client.
Totally.
I think that would be very beneficial.
I totally agree. That's been something that I've been really big on is that I think that as a leadership position, you need to be associated with a lot of positivity in the client's mind, and being the one that's banging down the door for invoices is not a really fun position to play.
No, but we did it to ourselves, because if we just continue to provide the service and you're not paying us, and like, we were growing very quickly, and so some things would fall under the radar. And we had one client who we were still working for actively, who hadn't paid us in like 90 days. And they were on like a very healthy, like one of our largest clients. And then it became, well, now they owe us like 50 grand. And so now you have to work your way out of that hole. And they're like, oh, like, can we get a payment plan or this and that? But as soon as that happened, like, we created a feedback loop between billing and the CSM. So like, if you don't pay us on time, we're not talking to you. Like, we're done. We're not sending an email. We're not sending a text. Like, part of it is a respect thing as well. Like, yeah. I mean, you have to, especially if you're paying after services have already been rendered, not in advance. Like,
totally.
We have a business to run here as well. And we're not, the type of company where you can have like net 90 terms or something.
Yeah. This is the part of it that I think nobody likes to talk about, though. And it's like a really crucial part is, I remember like in college, like working capital was this like, this equation they put it on the wall in finance class. And then it's actually cool though, to be able to run your own company and have to think about those things. And the answer does not come from a textbook, like you had to get really creative, be like, okay, fine. You want to do net 60? Great. Well, we're going to bill you up front. So actually it's effectively net 30. Or like figuring out, something we're doing right now is like auto pay stuff, right? Because I was looking at how much time our team was spending chasing down invoices, realized we could probably give a 5% discount if we just put people on auto pay. Save them money, save us time, which is effectively money. I think that the decisions like that are kind of cool, actually. And they're not some of the things that get talked about a lot.
No, I don't think they get talked about at all. And having not come from a traditional, business background, I think that's an area actually where I was hurt, is because I, wasn't really paying as close attention to that. And then, we were sending out invoices ad hoc, like whenever the client, like we would start on the 5th of the month or the 16th or the 12th or the 20th, like it did not matter. And so that we'd end up in this weird billing cadence where it wouldn't line up. And like, actually, I learned a lot more so than I've ever have about finances going through due diligence and going through the acquisition process. Because we started and stopped with one company and got very advanced with them, but they provided, me with basically their CFO, who was sort of like, this is the way that you should actually be doing things, which was, very helpful in, quote unquote, our finance department, which at that time was myself, getting us up to speed a little bit more with how we should actually be doing things.
And how like that finance, making sure your house is in order is really important as you're going through that acquisition process. And that's been one of the biggest changes that we've made, is outsourcing it to a fractional CFO. It's a really inexpensive service, and it's something that's going to yield you huge results almost immediately. You actually feel like you have good visibility as to where everything is, good reporting. Getting that stuff in line, I think, is huge. And it also has allowed us to do cool things with our team, because once you have that in line, then you can create performance-based incentives and align company success with your employees' personal success, which has been something that I'm really keen on. And I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, no, but I completely agree. Well, before I let you run here, I got one final question, because we primarily talked about more so entrepreneurship and building the business. But obviously, the holidays are coming up, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and whatnot. What is like the one thing that merchants absolutely need to be paying attention to, or that you're focused on with your clients in advance of that?
That's a good question. I think the number one thing, not only for this Black Friday, but more generally, is everyone's talking about community marketing, having their community-led growth for their brands. And that's something that we've investigated different solutions with our merchants, and there's not really a good one out there. Like no one wants to go join a Facebook group or join a Slack group or anything like that. Discord's kind of too techy, but they do it pretty well. So that's actually been a solution that we've built in-house, is this community building platform for brands. It's called Chatty. So we're rolling that out in the coming weeks and months here. And I think that that's something I'm really excited to see how that works for our initial crop of beta companies this season.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds awesome. I will be bugging you for a sneak peek of that, see what it's like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Before we hop, can you just let everybody know who's listening where they can connect and find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is definitely best, which is Varfaj, VARFAJ.com. And then also, LinkedIn and Twitter, which is at Varfaj.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on. For everybody listening, as always, this is Brandon Amoroso. You can find me at brandonamoroso.com or electricmarketing.com. And I will see you next time.